This is the future.
Are you ready to crush your bookies?
Evolution.
Here's my daddy, Professor MJ.
What's up, bookie crushers? Thanks for tuning in for this edition of What the Beep Happened in Week 2 in the NFL, a show where I'm going to recap all the action from the past week in the NFL. So more specifically, I will give each team a grade based on its performance. I will recap the key injuries, which players performed better or worse than expected. So basically all you need to know. And of course, since this is a sports betting channel, there will be a betting twist to it. For example, I will recap what my betting pick was on each game and how we did. So overall, there were 4 upsets yesterday, the bigger one being the Falcons upsetting the Vikings in Minnesota in the Sunday night game, while the other 3 upsets were quite small ones. Now, so far, my picks against the spread have posted an 8-6 record in Week 2, so we are off to a good start. Hopefully, the 2 Monday night games will provide a winning picks. There are 2 games tonight. And by the way, I have released a video many days ago revealing my best bet for each of those 2 games. So make sure you check out those 2 videos. All right, so let's get started with the Thursday night game. And by the way, before we get started, this is the first time that I'm doing this show live. It won't be perfect, and I apologize for that in advance. So it requires a lot of preparation. Hopefully the show will go smoothly. So please be reminded that some things may go not as planned. Hopefully there won't be any technical issues. All right, so let's start with the Thursday game. Let me show you this. So in that game, Washington lost 27-18 in Green Bay. My betting prediction here was to take the Packers minus 3 points, and this received a grade of B, and it was a winning pick. So we got off to a good start. Now I'll say a few words about this game before handing each team a grade. All right, so for the second straight week, the Packers were in full control of the game against a solid NFL squad. The total yards in that game were 404 against 230 for the Commanders. And by the way, no turnovers occurred in that game. Now, last week, the Packers squandered only 246 total yards to the Detroit Lions. So their defense has been very impressive so far. Now, both games were held at Lambeau Field. So let's see how they do when they go on the road. And by the way, this week in week 3, they will be traveling to Cleveland against the Browns. So they are likely to dominate again because it is a weak offense, of course. Jordan Love was quite efficient despite a limited wide receiver group. By the way, Jaden Reed suffered a broken collarbone. He is expected to return in November only. Now, Tucker Kraft picked up the slack by catching 6 balls for 124 yards and 1 TD. He was fantastic. If you own Tucker Kraft in your fantasy league, you are likely to have crushed it. Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs also played a key role in that victory, and they will need to be at their best if Green Bay wants to continue doing well on offense. And it's worth noting that the Packers were playing without 2 starting offensive linemen, Zach Tom and Aaron Banks, and they still picked up an easy win against a tough squad. Now the Commanders suffered a couple of big blows as they lost 2 players for season-ending injuries, running back Austin Eckler and also defensive end Dietrich Wise. Also, another injury worth noting is wide receiver Noah Brown, who left with a groin injury. It remains to be seen if he will miss some action or not for the Commanders. And by the way, in my Thursday Night Football video, I also strongly recommended to bet the Packers to win the NFC conference at odds that varied between plus 400 and plus 450. And I said that the odds may never be as high ever again for the rest of the season if they were going to get a convincing win against the Commanders, and that may be what's going to happen. Right now, the odds are between plus 300 and plus 350, and now the Packers are now favored in front of the Eagles to win the NFC conference. All right, in the next game, and by the way, this is the first technical issue. I don't have a slide presenting that pick, but in the Jacksonville-Cincinnati, before we move on to the second game, I've decided to give Washington a grade of C, whereas Green Bay gets the grade A for its solid performance on Thursday night. In the second game, Jacksonville traveled to Cincinnati to face the Bengals. And in that case, my pick was over 48.5 points to be scored, and we had 58. So the over was a winner. So at that point, we had a 2-0 record with our betting picks. As expected, both defenses struggled. I remember that one of my YouTube viewers was quite mad at the grade that I gave the Bengals last week. I did not give them a particularly great grade because they only won by 1 point in Cleveland against the lowly Browns. And I remember that this guy was mad because he said, well, the defense was fantastic, they were spectacular. Whereas I kind of disagree with that assessment. They gave up 16 points to the Browns, but if they did not have a kicker that sucked, they would have scored 20 points because he missed a chip shot field goal and also an extra point. Now, giving up 20 points to the Browns is not a big accomplishment. I suspected that their defense was still bad, and yesterday proved to be true. They gave up 27 points to the Jaguars. So I'm really not convinced that Cincinnati's defense has turned the corner and that they will be great. All right, so they gave up... So in that game, it featured 750 total yards of offense and 5 turnovers if you combine those two teams together. But of course, the biggest news out of this game is the injury to Joe Burrow. And I read this morning that he will be out for at least a minimum of 3 months with a toe injury. So that's a big blow to the Bengals, of course. So now this is Jake Browning's team. Yesterday, he completed 21 of 32 passes for a total of 241 yards, including 2 interceptions. But there was also a blemish. He threw 3 interceptions in that game. He will really need to cut down on the interceptions. Well, Browning did not play last year, but in 2023, he completed 70% of his passes while tossing 12 TD passes versus 7 interceptions, and he also rushed for 3 extra scores. So he did a fine job in 2023, and now Cincinnati must cross its fingers that he will do a good job again in 2025 because Joe Burrow is out for a while. Now, after a quiet first game, Ja'Marr Chase exploded with 14 receptions, while the second best player on his team only caught 3 balls, so he really dominated the targets. The Jaguars just simply could not stop Ja'Marr Chase in that game. So basically, Jake Browning led a 92-yard scoring drive for the game-winning touchdown late in the fourth quarter. On the other side, for the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence is off to a pretty good start to his 2025 season, but he was facing Carolina and Cincinnati, who have some of the worst defenses in the league, so let's not get overly excited yet about how he's done. I also like how Travis Etienne has looked very strong so far in 2025. I'm a bit concerned about the fact that Lawrence has had trouble connecting with Brian Thomas, his best wide receiver so far this year. In game 1, he targeted Thomas 7 times and they connected just once. And yesterday, Lawrence targeted Thomas on 12 occasions and Thomas came up with just four receptions. That's right. Lawrence did spread the ball around pretty nicely. He has lots of good weapons around him, but the defense will be a major problem in Jacksonville. So ultimately, I've decided to hand Jacksonville a grade of C, whereas Cincinnati gets B+. They overcame the loss of their quarterback, which was great, but again, their defense worries me quite a bit. Up next, let's move on to the Giants-Cowboys game. Show you my screen here. So the Cowboys prevailed 40-37 in overtime in what was probably the most entertaining game of Sunday. And both teams were close to 500 total yards of offense. Now, from a betting perspective, I took the Cowboys to win by a margin of 6 points or more. In other words, I took them with the minus 5.5 point spread. So this pick was a loss. The game was fun to watch except for one part that I really hated, and it was the penalties. There were way too many flags in that game. The Giants were penalized on 14 occasions compared to 12 times for the Cowboys. George Pickens scored what looked like a game-winning touchdown with 52 seconds left in the game. However, New York came back with a 48-yard reception by Malik Neighbors with 25 seconds left. So now we thought that the G-men were going to win, but then Brendan Aubrey nailed a 64-yard field goal as time expired to force overtime, and Aubrey then destroyed New York with a 46-yard field goal in overtime as time expired once again to get the W to the Cowboys. Now, let's be honest, we all thought that Russell Wilson was done and was washed after seeing him play in Week 1, but he rebounded nicely with 450 passing yards, including 3 touchdowns, but there was a big blemish. He threw an ill-advised pass in overtime that was intercepted and that literally caused the defeat for the Giants. Now, Malik Neighbors and Wandale Robinson are a very dynamic duo. In the fantasy world, I kept telling people that I thought Wandale Robinson was flying under the radar. He still caught 93 balls last season, and now he is off to a good start in 2025 again. Both of these guys recorded over 140 receiving yards yesterday in Dallas. Now for the Cowboys, Javonte Williams continued to impress me. He rushed 18 times for 97 yards on the ground, including a TD, which was his 3rd touchdown of the season so far. We all expected Dallas' ground game to suck this year, but Javonte Williams is running with some confidence that I like. He was also the number 2 target for this team. Dak Prescott was very good once again, and having a number 2 target really helps. Having George Pickens alongside with CeeDee Lamb is a boost for Dallas. Now, both defenses are a mess, of course, and the Micah Parsons trade looks even worse after seeing that ugly game yesterday, that ugly performance by the Cowboys defense. It was the first win as a head coach for Brian Schottenheimer, and he will certainly remember that game. It was so exciting. Did you know that Dak Prescott just beat the Giants for the 14th straight game? That's truly amazing. He lost both encounters with the G-men as a rookie, but since then he has posted a perfect 14-0 record against New York. There is one injury worth noting. Cavante Turpin left in the 3rd quarter after a kickoff return where he suffered a neck injury. He has been a pretty good weapon for Dallas. He's so speedy. We'll see if he can come back next week. Now I have decided to award these teams the same grade. Both receive a B- grade, and because Dallas they won, but they were not that convincing, and they were really saved by their kicker. If they had an ordinary kicker, they would have never won this game. So thank God they have Brendan Aubrey on their roster, because they were expected to handle the Giants easily, but it was really a hard-fought battle. So the Giants get a B- grade, and the Cowboys also get a B-. All right, up next, in a NFC North battle, the Lions destroyed the Bears 52-21. In that case, my pick really sucked. I took the Bears +6, and they lost by a big margin. At least this pick received a grade of C, so it showed that I was not super confident, and it faltered badly. So we really questioned Detroit's offense after a poor Week 1 performance at Lambeau Field, and they rebounded big time. One of the reasons why I graded this pick as a C was because I was worried about the Lions, who are usually much better at home, especially their offense with all of their speed, and they did rebound in a big way. They totaled 511 yards of offense, and the star of the game was really Amon-Ra St. Brown, who caught 9 balls for 115 yards, including 3 touchdowns. So you are probably happy if you own him in fantasy drafts right now. Last week, the ground game for Detroit averaged just 2.1 yards per carry. So again, I was concerned about that outcome, but this week they were back to what they looked like last year, with a 5.9 yard per carry average against the Bears. Jared Goff threw 5 TD passes against a very decent defense. We're not talking about one of the worst defenses in the NFL. The Bears are likely to be in the middle of the pack, so this was an impressive performance by the Lions offense. On the other hand, Caleb Williams was his usual self. We saw some good and some bad out of him. Now, Rome Odunze is breaking out so far this year. He has accumulated 3 TDs in 2 games. So Ben Johnson's return in Detroit was wildly unsuccessful. His defense was super porous. He must be very disappointed by the performance by his Bears team. Did you know that the Lions set a new team record yesterday? In fact, they averaged 8.8 yards per play on offense. This was very impressive. Some injuries worth noting for the Bears. They were already without defensive back Kyle Gordon, and now they lost cornerback Jalen Johnson during the game, and also linebacker TJ Edwards. So that's a source of concern for a defense that struggled mightily yesterday. On Detroit's side, they lost defensive end Marcus Davenport after he recorded his first sack of the season. He got banged up and left the game. So basically, this game shows how great the Green Bay's defense is, because they really shut down Detroit's offense, and you can see that they are still a very good unit. So I've decided to award Chicago a grade of D, whereas Detroit gets A+ for that dominating performance. They get the best possible grade. So hats off to the Detroit Lions for their performance yesterday. Up next, we will discuss the Rams-Titans game. In this case, I took the Titans plus 3.5 points in the first half, and I'm not sure why this slide is showing it as a lost pick, because it was a winner. The Titans led 13-10 at halftime, so this was a winning pick, and it also received a grade A prior to the game. I really liked it. All right, this time, the Titans led 13-10 at halftime, but then they got dominated in the second half. In fact, the Rams dominated the second portion of the game by a 23-6 score. They are the more experienced group, and it really showed in the second half. Now, so far, rookie Cam Ward has faced two stiff tests. He played at Denver and now at home against a tough Rams defense. He did fare better yesterday by completing 19 of his 33 passes. He accumulated 175 yards through the air, along with one touchdown and no interception. However, he did fumble the ball once in that game. If you look at the total yards, the Rams accumulated 439 versus only 252 for the Titans. Puka Nacua and Davante Adams are just a fantastic duo. They are really tough to slow down. Tennessee just could not do it. Whereas in the prior week, the Rams offense struggled a lot more because Houston's defense had the weapons on the defensive side of the ball to slow them down, but it was not the case for Tennessee. So now Tennessee has dropped each of its past 8 games if you go back to last year. Now the rookie wide receiver, Elik Ayumanor, showed good flashes so far this season. He got 4 receptions for 56 yards, including a very great TD catch late in the second quarter. Injuries worth noting for Tennessee. They lost Kevin Zeitler, the right guard, to an elbow injury, and also cornerback L'Jarius Sneed visited the medical tent a couple of times late in the game, so we will need to monitor the situation. We'll see if he's good to go for next week. So in the end, I'm awarding the Rams an A- grade. They had a fairly weak first half, but they were very great in the second half. And a road win is always good, so they get A-. Whereas for the Rams, I'll give them a C grade. They made a valiant effort, but ultimately they could not come up with the win. They really faltered in the second half. Up next, and we will skip this one. Again, a little technical issue as I don't have a slide for the Patriots Dolphins game. Well, in fact, this was my lobster bet of the week. This is the bet that I like the most, and unfortunately, it lost. I really liked under 22.5 points to be scored in the first half, whereas a total of 29 points were scored. A late second quarter TD just made this bet a loser, unfortunately. Well, clearly the highlight of the game was Malik Washington returning a punt for 74 yards for a touchdown, and in the ensuing kickoff, the Patriots returned the kickoff for a touchdown, a 90-yard return by Antonio Gibson. So you rarely see that. 2 special team touchdowns on 2 consecutive plays. That was fun to watch. It was really an hard-fought AFC East battle. The stats were pretty even for both clubs. Drake May was quite efficient by completing 19 of his 23 passes for 230 yards. He tossed 2 TDs versus 0 interception. And he also did damage on the ground by rushing 10 times for 31 yards, and he also got a rushing TD in that game. It was weird seeing how his leading receiver was Ramondre Stevenson, who caught 5 balls. Now, I read some reports that maybe rookie Trevon Henderson would get involved even more in the game. By the way, if you are in fantasy drafts, you are probably aware of the fact that most people were drafting Trevon Henderson well ahead of Ramondre Stevenson. But so far, Stevenson remains the starter in the backfield for the Patriots. Now, Tua was better in week 2 than in week 1. He was under constant pressure from the Patriots, who sacked him on 5 occasions. He still found a way to throw for 315 yards, mostly to Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and also Devon Achane. It was the first win as a head coach, a New England head coach for Mike Vrabel against his former team. So this was good for him. Miami looked out of sync on many occasions. They had some communication issues on multiple occasions. They really need to fix that. I know that they had a players-only meeting during last week, but it looks like not all problems have been fixed following that meeting, of course. So Miami's defense, it looks really bad. Last week, they gave up a score on all 7 drives from the Colts, and now they were not much better this week by giving up 33 points to New England. And now the bad news is Miami will be traveling to Buffalo on a short week on Thursday Night Football against a high-octane Bills offense. Oof, it does not bode very well for Miami. I don't think there are any injuries worth noting in this case. And now, so ultimately, I've decided to give. This is not the correct slide. So I've decided to give the Patriots a grade of B+. Drake May looked more crisp, but their pass defense is a source of concern. They were quite weak, and they are really a liability. Drake May took full advantage of Miami's pass defense, which was bad as well. And I will give Miami a C- grade for this performance. The offense looked better, but the defense is a major problem, and losing at home against the Patriots is not so good, of course. Up next, in the San Francisco-New Orleans game, I took San Francisco minus 4.5, and since they won the game by a 5-point margin, this was a tight victory. It was graded C, and it was a winning pick by a hair. Now, I expected the Niners to pick up the slack despite having multiple key injuries. So they were without QB Brock Purdy. They were missing tight end George Kittle, and of course Brandon Ayuk at wide receiver. But still, they found a way to exit New Orleans with the W, but it was not an easy win at all. In terms of total yardage, San Francisco led 344 to 307. Mac Jones did a good job in relief of Brock Purdy. He completed 26 of his 39 passes for 279 yards, and he tossed 3 TDs versus 0 interceptions, which was critical. Christian McCaffrey had a second straight good game as he totaled 107 yards, both as a runner and as a receiver. The defense is a bit worrisome for San Francisco. They were facing a bad offense, but they still gave up too many points in my opinion. They gave up 3 TD passes to Spencer Rattler. I mean, come on. And also they gave up 4.0 yards on average on the ground per carry, which is not so good either. Now, Spencer Rattler just cannot buy a victory. He is now 0-8 as a starter in the NFL, even though he is playing better football. Once again, the Saints had the ball late in the game for a chance to either tie it or to take the lead, but they could not take advantage of that opportunity. They got the ball back at their own 6-yard line with 2 minutes and 40 seconds left. Now they made it up to their own 42-yard line. They had a 3rd and 1 and also missed on the 4th and 1, which basically ended the game. In terms of injuries, San Francisco left guard Ben Bartch left with an ankle injury, and their fullback Kyle Juszczyk left with a concussion. We will see if they can play next week. In terms of each team's grade, I've decided to give San Francisco an A- grade. Of course, they did a good job given the fact that they were missing some key players, but they were still facing possibly the worst NFL club, so it's nothing to write home about. And for the Saints, I will give them a fairly generous B grade. I mean, to me, they are rebuilding. They may be the worst club in the NFL, so every time that they will be competitive, to me, that is a good outcome for them. So I'll give them some slack by awarding a grade of B to the Saints. Up next, in the Bills-Jets game, I took New York plus 3.5 points in the first half, and at halftime, the score was 20-3 in favor of Buffalo, so this pick was a loser. Now let's review some key aspects from this game. Well, prior to this match, Josh Allen had often struggled at MetLife Stadium, and that was one of the reasons why I took the Jets to keep the score tight at halftime, but it did not occur. Even though Josh Allen did not put up some big numbers, in fact, he did not even score any touchdown, and it was good to see the Bills winning in convincing fashion without needing Josh Allen to play Superman again. James Cook ran the ball 21 times for 132 yards, and he scored 2 times on the ground. Again, Josh Allen spread the ball around with nobody getting more than 4 receptions in this match. So that makes Buffalo's offense hard to predict for opposing defenses. In terms of first downs, the Bills led 25-11. They really dominated the first downs. They also outrageously dominated total yardage, 403 to 154 for the Jets. In fact, the Jets went 0 for 11 on third downs. Come on, man. The Bills' defense was mad after getting smashed by the Ravens in Week 1. Many people were saying, well, the Bills' defense really sucked big time. Well, they responded nicely with a great performance, even though they were without Ed Oliver, who, in my opinion, was probably the best defensive player for Buffalo in Week 1. Now, if we focus on the Jets, after a promising first start as a Jet, Justin Fields really fell flat on his face in his second game. He completed, pay attention to that, just 3 passes out of 11 for a grand total of 27 passing yards. He left in the fourth quarter with a concussion, but he still obtained just 27 passing yards in more than 3 quarters. That is abysmal. And now, aside from Justin Fields, who got knocked out of the game, defensive end Jermaine Johnson and safety Tony Adams got hurt for New York. On Buffalo's side, the biggest source of concern in terms of injuries was linebacker Matt Milano, who did not play in the second half, so we will have to monitor the situation to see if he is available on a short week against the Dolphins on Thursday. All right, so, and the grades in this case, show you my screen again. So I've decided to give Buffalo an A+ grade. It was a dominating performance. And like I said, I like the fact that they did not ask Josh Allen to be Superman this time around. They just rolled both on offense and on defense. It was a complete effort, so they fully deserve an A+ grade. And as far as the Jets are concerned, they get an F grade. They really failed. They were bad on all 3 phases of the game. They fully deserve that grade, in my opinion. Up next, let's talk about the Seahawks and Steelers this time, and I lost this pick. I took the Steelers minus 2.5 points, and now they lost by 14 points against Seattle. Now let's review some key aspects from this match. So after trailing 14-7, Seattle bounced back on the road at Pittsburgh, which is very impressive. Now, it may be time to be officially worried about the Steelers' defense. They were not very good against the Jets last week, and we saw how New York's offense sucked in Week 2, and now they gave up 395 total yards to Seattle, who did not look so good in Week 1 either. In fact, Sam Darnold looked quite bad against San Francisco in Week 1, and he was much better this time in Pittsburgh. He completed 22 of his 33 passes for close to 300 yards. He tossed 2 TD passes, but there was a blemish on his part. He did throw 2 picks in the first half. In week 1, Darnold had only one reliable target, Jackson Smith and Jiba, but this time Cooper Kupp came alive with 7 grabs, and also rookie Torrey Orton caught his first TD pass in the NFL. So the Seahawks really need these two guys to step up their game. They cannot win if Smith and Jiba is the only guy who can catch passes for the Seahawks. Now Aaron Rodgers really failed miserably on his home debut, and also DK Metcalf was largely a non-factor against his former team. He only caught 3 balls for 20 yards, so this was quite surprising. For Pittsburgh, they had one injury worth noting, linebacker Alex Highsmith, who left in the second quarter and did not return. We'll see if that is a big injury or not. So after analyzing this game, I feel like the Seahawks deserve a B+ grade. It was still a solid road win, a good bounce-back effort by Sam Darnold, but he threw a couple of picks. And let's be honest, the Seattle Seahawks took advantage of some Pittsburgh blunders. I will go back to that when we get to my WTF moments of the week later. And as far as the Steelers are concerned, I'll give them a C- grade. They were really awful in the second half, and also Aaron Rodgers throwing 2 picks was quite bad against an ordinary Seattle defense. Next, I took the Ravens minus 6.5 points in the first half, and since they led 10-3 at halftime, this was a winning pick. Now, what's important to note here, sorry about that, well, the Ravens won by a big score, but they only obtained 14 first downs in that game compared to 17 for Cleveland. And also, if you look at the total yards, Cleveland dominated 323 to 242. But one of the problems was that Joe Flacco turned the ball over twice, 1 interception and 1 fumble, and he was harassed all game long. He only got 199 passing yards via 45 passing attempts. Now rookie Quinton Judkins made his NFL debut, and he was involved in the game more than what most people expected. He carried the ball 10 times for 61 yards, whereas the former starter, Jerome Ford, only got 6 carries. So that was quite surprising given how Judkins has missed pretty much all of season due to some legal issues. Another surprising thing that happened in that game was Derrick Henry being limited to 23 rushing yards on 11 carries after running wild against the Buffalo Bills. Lamar Jackson threw for 4 TD passes in this game, including a couple to Devontae Walker. Walker was a 4th-round pick out of North Carolina, and did you know that so far in his career, he has caught just 3 passes, but all 3 were for touchdowns, which is quite amusing. The Ravens scored 21 points off the interception, the fumble, and also a blocked punt, so that really helped to put up a big score against Cleveland. Some injuries. For Baltimore, they lost linebacker Kyle Van Noy and also defensive back Marlon Humphrey, who got banged up. Based on what head coach said after the game, it's not too serious, but let's see if they miss some time or not. But apparently, we're not talking about multi-week absence for these guys. All right, so in this case, Cleveland gets a grade of D for this performance, whereas I'll give Baltimore A-. Usually when you win with such a big score, you get a better grade than A-. But as I said, it was not a dominating performance. It was a grind. Even their head coach said it after the game. It was not that easy. It was a grind throughout the game in this AFC North battle. Next, wow, what an incredible game this was. From a betting perspective, I took the Colts plus 0.5 point in the first half, and unfortunately they trailed 21-20 at halftime, so it was a tight loss. We needed the Colts to either be tied or to lead at halftime, but that did not happen, unfortunately. All right, so in this game, Dondria Tillman literally cost Denver the victory. He was flagged for leverage when the kicker Spencer Schrader missed on a 60-yard field goal, and then after the penalty on the ensuing play, he nailed the game-winning 45-yard field goal. And so far, Spencer Schrader has made all 9 of his field goal attempts in 2025, so hats off to him. Now, the question is the Colts offense really good, or is Denver's defense not as good as we projected? Well, personally, I am leaning towards the former assumption. I think the Colts offense is much better than we anticipated before the season began. Jonathan Taylor really looks like the guy from 2021 who racked up around 1,800 rushing yards along with 18 rushing TDs. And also, I know that nobody gets overly excited about Daniel Jones, but he's been quite effective so far this year, and he has a lot of good weapons around him. He has Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, and also second-year man Adonai Mitchell, who has been getting praised for his work ethic and how he has performed in training camp. And of course, the team drafted tight end Tyler Warren in the first round of the draft, so they have a lot of pretty good weapons around Daniel Jones. In this game, they accumulated 473 total yards against possibly the top defense in the NFL, so this was an impressive effort by the Colts offense. So Daniel Jones completed 23 of his 34 passes for a total of 316 passing yards, and once again, he did not turn the ball over. He also picked up a third rushing score in the 2025 campaign. Now, Bo Nix was much better in Week 2 than he was in Week 1. He completed 22 of his 30 passes for a total of 206 passing yards, including 3 TD passes versus 1 interception. Wide receiver Troy Franklin broke out with 8 receptions, whereas everybody else on the team got 3 receptions or fewer, including who is supposed to be the leading receiver in the team, Courtland Sutton, only getting 1 reception in this game, which was very surprising. So pay attention to Troy Franklin, who has some potential for Denver. Something quite interesting. It was the first time in the Super Bowl era that a team has not punted a single time in their first 2 games of the season. So that is the accomplishment made by the Indianapolis Colts so far this year. Injuries worth noting. Star cornerback Patrick Surtain hurt his left ankle. He ended up playing through the injury, but let's see if it will impact the quality of his play. He is really a shutdown corner for Denver. It will be interesting to see how his ankle responds next week. Now, All-Pro left guard Quentin Nelson for the Colts hurt his knee. He came back in the game, so hopefully he is okay. I've decided to give the Broncos a C grade. Bo Nix was more crisp, but the defense was unexpectedly disappointing in this game. They gave up multiple long runs to Jonathan Taylor in this game. And as far as the Colts are concerned, let's give them a B+. If we focus on the offense only, they certainly deserve A+, but the defense was not so good, and the Colts also committed 11 penalties. They really need to clean that up if they want to pick up more wins. So a great win overall for the Colts, who are now 2-0 to start the season. Next, the Panthers made a comeback attempt, but they failed and they lost 27-22 in Arizona. Once again, the point spread set by oddsmaker was quite accurate. It was very close. I said in my weekly video that I took the Panthers plus 6.5 points. This was a winning pick since they lost by a margin of 5 points. So Arizona led 27-3. They were cruising to an easy victory, but then the Panthers came back and made it a 5-point game, and they even recovered an onside kick. And they made it to Arizona's 38-yard line, but they were stopped. So the Cardinals ended up getting the W. So this was not necessarily a great home win by the Cardinals. The total yards were 352 to 293 in favor of Carolina. And also the first downs were 26 to 16 in favor of Carolina. Arizona's pass defense gave up 328 yards to Bryce freaking Young. That is not good at all. Hunter Renfrow did not play last year, and now he's making a comeback in the NFL this season. He contributed a lot this week by catching 7 balls for 48 yards, and he scored 2 touchdowns. Now, Calais Campbell, who has been in the league for 18 years, he secured the win with a game-ending sack. So hats off to Campbell for that critical play for Arizona. Now, injuries, there is a big source of concern for Arizona, something to monitor. 3 of their cornerbacks were banged up in that game. Will Johnson, Max Melton, and Garrett Williams. So you really need to pay attention to that for next week. Let's see if they can play or not, because having 3 guys at the same position getting hurt could be a big problem for Arizona, who was already bad this week defending the pass against a fairly bad quarterback. In terms of team grades, I'll give Carolina a C. They really looked dreadful for 3 quarters, but then all of a sudden, they came alive in the 4th quarter. As far as Arizona is concerned, I will give them a B-. They nearly squandered a 27-3 lead, but Kyler Murray was fairly efficient in that game, and the defense harassed Bryce Young. They did put some pressure on him, but they still gave up way too many yards to him for my taste. All right, let's move on to the next game. It was a Super Bowl rematch, and it was much tighter than the Super Bowl, but ultimately the Eagles still prevailed. They still prevailed by a 20-17 score. My betting pick was to go with the Eagles to win straight up, and they did win, so this was a winning pick. Well, the key play in this game was definitely the pass that bounced off the hands of Travis Kelce in those of Mukuba for the interception near the goal line. That was really a backbreaker for the Chiefs. They were about to score a touchdown maybe, and instead they got intercepted. This was a backbreaker. So Patrick Mahomes was missing many of his key wide receivers, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy. So what did he do? Well, he ran with the ball more. He rushed 7 times for 66 yards. He was really good in that department. And he relied mostly on Travis Kelce and Hollywood Brown. But I'm sure that he cannot wait for the return of Rice and or Worthy, because the team is not really clicking on offense. Well, the Eagles' offense struggled quite a bit on offense as well for the most part, but they did enough plays to get the W. Did you know that the Eagles are now 17-1 across their last 18 games overall? That is impressive. There was only, unless I forgot something, I think there was just one injury worth noting. For the Chiefs, defensive end Mike Dana left in the first quarter and never returned on the field. Now, for this victory, I've decided to give the Eagles a B+ grade. It was not always pretty, but it was still a road win in Kansas City, which is always good, of course. As far as the Chiefs are concerned, I'll go with a C+. They really have some trouble completing passes down the field. They need wide receiver help for sure. And also the ground game is doing an okay job, but it's not helping Patrick Mahomes all that much. and that puts extra pressure on his shoulders to carry the team on his shoulders, of course. All right, in the Sunday night game, well, I don't have a slide for this one, but I picked the Falcons plus 4 points, and they won the game by 22-6 score, so this was another winning bet. So like I said at the beginning of this video, in total, I have had 8 wins and 6 losses with my betting picks. There was only one TD scored in that game, which was Tyler Algier running for a score late in the fourth quarter. So J.J. McCarthy, the rookie QB for the Vikings, could not stage a comeback for the second straight game. At this time, he got less than 200. The team for the Vikings totaled less than 200 yards, which was awful. The team also turned the ball over 4 times, so you just cannot do that in the NFL. 3 of those turnovers were caused by McCarthy. I believe he had 2 picks and 1 fumble, if I remember correctly. But I think we have to give credit to Atlanta's defense. That could be underrated right now. I feel like they could be flying under the radar. They did a very fine job against a tough Bucs offense in week 1, and now they really shut down Minnesota, who has a decent offense. And finally, the Falcons are very happy about finally having a good pass rush. They sacked McCarthy on 6 occasions this week, and I'm sure that drafting James Pierce and Jalon Walker in the first round of this year's draft has really helped the team. This has been a problem for the Falcons defense for many, many years, but they seem to be turning the corner because they are putting some pressure on opposing QBs so far in 2025. Now, a big source of concern for Atlanta's defense is losing cornerback A.J. Terrell. He left the game in the second quarter and never returned. That is a key piece of information that you need to monitor ahead of week 3. Now, this time, Michael Penix did not need to carry his team on his shoulder because the Falcons ran wild. Bijan Robinson looked explosive. He rushed 22 times for 143 yards. He really gashed Minnesota's defense. And Tyler Algier also contributed a lot with 16 rushes for 76 yards. They really took full advantage of the absence of Andrew Van Ginkel, Harrison Smith, and also Blake Cashman. And now Minnesota suffered more injuries, so they are really piling up. They lost running back Aaron Jones, center Ryan Kelly, and left tackle Justin School, who was already replacing the starter. So there are a lot of injuries for the Vikings. So pay attention to that when you are going to handicap their week 3 matchup. So I've decided to give Atlanta a grade of A. The only reason why they don't get A+ is because they had some red zone issues on offense. They really scored many field goals. They just could not punch it in the end zone consistently enough for my taste. But still, it was a great performance on the road in Minnesota on primetime television. And Minnesota, I will give them D+. I know they had some injuries, but the play on the field was still ordinary. J.J. McCarthy struggled quite a bit. The defense, they only gave up 22 points, but it could have been a lot worse if the Falcons could have punched the ball in the end zone more frequently. All right, so that does it for my recap of the week 2 so far in the NFL. We have 2 more great games tonight. If you have not done it already, I invite you to watch my betting picks for the 2 Monday night games. So we have the Bucs traveling to Houston against the Texans, and at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, the Chargers will be traveling to Vegas. So I have 2 betting picks for you. So go check out this video. Now I want to thank you very much for watching this video. Subscribe to the best sports betting channel on YouTube, hosted by the holder of a PhD in statistics, a former 15-year university statistics professor. My number one goal is to grow your sports betting bankroll, so I hope you will follow us during the NFL season. I'm Professor MJ saying so long. Thanks for watching, my friend.